Going through like suicidal thoughts. I've been having anxiety since I was 16, depression, eating disorder. I was on antidepressants. I did EMDR therapy, and people think, oh, you're a nurse, you know how to handle all these things. That's not true. Led me to a pretty dark path right before I met the medicine. Internally for me, it was good, but it was also dark. Especially the few years before I met the medicine. I went through pretty significant things, separation from my son's father, depression, anxiety, had been having anxiety since I was 16, eating disorder. I was on antidepressants. I did EMDR therapy. Even that, sometimes when people think, oh, you're a nurse, you know how to handle all these things, that's not true. But life for me was pretty dark, and to the point where I was starting to have or was going through like suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideations, especially once the separation with my son's father happened. And then COVID and the isolation of COVID in 2020 was pretty much what um, led me to a pretty dark path right before I met the medicine.
Wow, thanks for sharing. What was your experience with the therapy and taking the medication?
Looking back now, everything that I tried and that I experienced helped me to stay alive, I would say. So from even antidepressants, which I no longer take anymore, my anxiety medication, my eating disorder medication, the therapy, the EMDR, the counseling, all of it, I feel that it helped me to stay alive, because I was having very dark thoughts. Um, but I feel that it helped me to keep the hope alive and the faith alive. I don't think if I would have had any of those things, even the medication and the pharmaceuticals, I wouldn't be here. So I never like to, even as a nurse, like I never like to discredit medication because I feel that it does what it needs to do. Um, I'm a huge testimony of that. It kept me alive when I needed it. And I had never wanted to be on antidepressants. As a nurse too, I was always very like, no, I'm not going to get on antidepressants. I had been on anxiety medications since I was 16, and I did always keep my bottle of Xanax in my pocket. But antidepressants was a stigma I even had as a nurse, until the point where I made a phone call to my brother, who's an ER doctor, and I was just like, I'm not okay. And it's like he knew, because he's like, you're going to the doctor tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And I knew, my heart knew that it wanted to stay alive because I had an infant to take care of. My mind was the one telling me that I shouldn't. And it was the antidepressants that kept me alive. So I always credit them because they did what they needed to do at that time. And I'm never ashamed to say, this and this and this helped me.
After going through that experience, how would you say plant medicine found you?
I love that actually, because there's always this inside joke that I have with myself or with plant medicine and Mother Ayahuasca is, she found me. I had been looking for her for a while, but she found me. And so um, there's that nice little way to put it. So I like the way that you brought it up. Um, Plant medicine, specifically Mother Ayahuasca, found me through a connection with a really good friend from high school. And we went our separate ways after high school. We hadn't really talked in years. And he came across like one of my Instagram videos that I had posted because I had always been into like healing and spirituality and consciousness and all of those things. So I was like, I posted a reel, and he was scrolling on his feed. He's like, oh, you came up. So it was one of those like synchronistic things. And he sent me a message. He's like, hey, I see you're on the path of like spirituality and healing. How have you been? So we connected. I told him what I was going through, what was driving me to be on this really deep path. And he mentioned that he worked with ayahuasca. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I've been working with, my shaman for 7 years. I hold space. I'm a guardian. I help out in her ceremony. So it was like, I was just like, I had been the ayahuasca had been like popping off in my YouTube feed for a while, and I would just like kind of look at videos. I was like, what is that? I had never um tried a psychedelic or anything. And so I was reading about it, I was doing research. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it does, but I know if I can get to this, it'll heal me. It was like this internal like pull. And so I just kind of left it off because I'm like, oh, I have to go out of the country. I can't leave my son. All these things I don't want to do by myself, the safetiness of it. And so when my friend came up, and he shared this and that he worked with our guide in Chicago, which is where I'm originally from. I'm in Texas now. I'm like 100%. I just knew that that was the moment. I'm like, okay. Then it just became about like scheduling the ceremony and logistics of that. But that's how she found me.
What was your preparation like leading up to the ceremony?
One thing that my friend shared with me in terms of preparation was you start, which is 100% true. You start preparing the moment that you say yes, that you set your intention of like, I'm going to go on this retreat or I'm going to go to ceremony, because the medicine starts to test us from that moment that you make that commitment or that intention. And so she'll test you all the way up until you're holding that cup before you drink it. And this is every ceremony. But especially if it's your first time, like he warned me, like, hey, you've kind of made your intention. She'll start working with you. So there's like triggers that come up even more so. Then you're kind of working through, or the opposite can happen. Which is what happened to me. It wasn't so much triggers. It was, I started to feel really good for like, and I had already stopped my antidepressants, but I was like, I feel oddly strange. Like I feel really good. And so I remember messaging my friend, I don't think I need to go anymore. Like I'm doing really well. And he just like chuckled and he's like, you sure about that? And I'm like, yeah, like, these things don't bother me. And so he started like pulling up different scenarios of how I would still through text or phone conversations would bring up things that really bothered me. And so he sat down and like had a conversation with me. And so I always, now that I help others prepare for ayahuasca, I share, the preparation starts the moment that you say yes, and you start to prepare your mind, mainly your mind. You quiet the mind, you start to pull back from toxic places, toxic people. You start to go more within. There's obviously the physical preparation, which is the diet and just the main thing that you do. But to have, I think, a really successful ceremony is it begins with the preparation and then intention. And by success, everybody's is different. It's just to be able to go in and receive as much from the medicine as you can. I think that's what I would define as success. What allowing the medicine to work through you instead of fear or the mind.
Thinking back before you took your first drink, what were you feeling inside of you?
That's when like the fear really started to set in, because I started talking to the people who were at the retreat. And you had, I mean, veterans with ayahuasca that had been doing like a whole lot of ceremonies. And there was one other girl who was new to the medicine. And so when they started talking about like what they would see and the visions, and like I started to get fear. Um, Prior to that, I was just nervous. I was mainly nervous about like how my life would be different, because I knew, like in my heart, I knew once I take this medicine, my life's not going to be the same. And I don't know what that looks like. So that kind of gave me anxiety. But talking to the people helped a little bit, but it also instilled a little bit of fear. And but I knew like I sat for 2 nights, and the first night I'm like I'm gonna do it. So I was given my cup of medicine, and I said a prayer into it, and I was just like, please help me. Like that's all, I that's all I wanted. And I drank my cup, and then I used to suffer from really bad anxiety. So like immediately after I took my cup, I started having heart palpitations and I started hyperventilating. So I had to like almost walk myself through that and tell myself like, well, it can't be the medicine because you just drank it literally 5 minutes ago. Like, calm down, you know. But um, I started having like hyperventilation, and my heart started pounding so fast. And then within about 30 minutes, I started to hear thoughts like very present. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, and again, I didn't know what to expect. I had never tried any sort of psychedelic before. Um, and it was I will never forget the thought that came through my head, and it was about something that I had gone through in childhood that I didn't even remember. But the medicine was bringing it to light, and it was very traumatic. Um, and then after that, it went through this one particular experience that I had gone through in childhood, and then it took me to like what I would say a really dark place within me. Um, what I would describe as hell. Um, and like I was in that vision, I was chained. Um, yeah, with chains, there was fire everywhere. I don't even know how I did ayahuasca for the second night because it was so traumatic for me and I will never forget it. But it was the ceremony that shook me and cured my anxiety and my depression. And so, like, I'm eternally grateful for it, but it was very brutal. And I could not understand, like, why I was living this experience. But now, you know, looking back and what I know about the medicine is, she works as a mirror. So she was showing me everything. And she did explain it to me. She's like, I am showing everything that lives in your mind. This is your mind. And if you want to continue living in this place, keep doing what you're doing, you know, like keep sabotaging yourself, keep, you know, thinking these thoughts about yourself, keep thinking these thoughts about life, like all these things. She's like, or you have the choice to change this. The second night was kind of the rebirth of that. I literally fought like with myself about even doing the second night, but I'm like, I'm already here. I had traveled from Texas. I'm like, just do it, which I'm so grateful that I did because it was a complete opposite of the first night. Um, but yeah, it was brutal. It was me basically. She was showing me everything that I was living in, and then that it what it was made up of, like the root cause of where it was coming from, um, what would happen if I continued to live my life that way, how my life would change if I made these changes in my life. And night two was a lot different. It was still hard, but it was different, like a different hard. And that was when I experienced like a rebirth, like a spiritual rebirth. And yeah, and then the rest is kind of history after that.
As you're getting these insights, do you recall how you're processing everything at the moment?
It was very difficult to process because it was an abuse that happened that I had always had a very deep um almost knowing that something had happened to me, but I could never confirm it. And it was just I lived with it, but I'm like, no, you don't know, Maria, you don't know that that happened, you know, but it was very deep in there. And it was like you know, when you know something. And so when it came up, it was almost like there was a polarity with it because it was almost like it was confirmation that I wasn't crazy and that something did happen to me. And it was also a lot of anger that it happened to me. So I was caught in between feeling these two very big emotions of confirmation that you're not crazy. Also, the medicine showing me the root of why I was the certain way. why I had um self like worthlessness thoughts, why I thought that, I was a piece of shit, basically, like all of these things, why I thought I was like ugly and like all these beautiful things, excuse me, all these horrible things about myself stemmed from that. So first she showed it to me, and then I was very angry because it was a child that was like the innocence was completely stolen and tarnished. And this child grew up to believe these things about herself. And so then I became very angry. And then I was struggling with that because the medicine was asking me to forgive. But it's very hard when you're seeing all of this and when you see how your life, um, like how your life happened or the trajectory of your life because of this situation. And so I had to sit there with that. When I was struggling with that anger, the medicine said to me, what does anger do for you? It's not going to change what happened because it already did. And it's not going to change your future because it'll fill you up with bitterness and anger. So what is it doing to you? What are you going to use that anger for? And then I answered myself, well, there's nothing I can do with this anger. So I sat with that for a while, and eventually I just told myself that I would work on forgiveness. It didn't happen right away until very few more ceremonies after that. That I touched on the power of forgiveness for that person, um, and yeah, now I look at it differently.
Did forgiveness begin in that ceremony, or do you feel like it came after?
I think that was the first ceremony where the true power of what forgiveness would do for you that was like brought to light, because before we think, oh yeah, I can forgive somebody, oh yeah, forgiveness, and it's just a word. But that ceremony opened the door for me to walk through understanding what forgiveness is, not just for the person who did that, but for everybody. For at that time, opened the door to forgiveness to myself for speaking badly about myself my whole life, or for the things that I used to do, for the way I treated my body, for forgiveness for my son's dad. Like it opened up like Pandora's box of, well, what does forgiveness mean? I like I mentioned before, I wasn't quite ready to forgive that person that in that ceremony. It was almost like, because she works in layers, so it's like that first ceremony kind of opened the door to even understand, and then ceremonies down the line, it started to unravel more of what forgiveness means. And it was a few ceremonies down the line where I was like, okay, I forgive this person. And I even had this thought to myself early on then, what would I do, if I were to see that person now? And if I still felt anger, I'm like, okay, I haven't forgiven yet, and now I could say that if I were to see that person, um, I would probably feel different. I wouldn't feel anger. I would probably feel um compassion, almost, in a sense. Um Also, still, and I would be honest, still understanding, because there's layers to things, but I can see now, even within my own self, the difference of where I was with my mindset then to where I'm at now with it.
Have you noticed a difference in others who've also sat with plant medicine as far as like their compassion and how they act towards others?
100%. Uh, There's just no way. I mean, if you do it in the right space, which I'm sure we'll get into later on on this call, but if you do experience ayahuasca in a safe manner with a contained space, um, there's no way that you don't come back with that sense of compassion and gratitude. I think first and foremost is gratitude, um, and then compassion, and they go hand in hand. And one thing that I do want to add to this is what you said about, why we go back. I think one of the most important things is I get asked this a lot too. Now my path is different than in the beginning. I go back a lot because I'm studying now, but when I first started to go back and now knowing what I know about the medicine, it's what I like to say to people is going back to ayahuasca is no different than going back to the gym. I call it the spiritual gym because when we go to ayahuasca, there's weights that you got to do. There's weights that and reps that you have to do to strengthen you to learn, like for myself, right? To learn forgiveness. And it's got to take a couple reps to build that muscle. And then there's a different part like self-love. That's a whole other isolation, right? When we look at the analogy of Aya, and it's no different than working out different muscle groups in your body. You're not going to build particular muscle if you only go to the gym once and do one set of squats and that's it, right? You go multiple times and you build this regimen and this relationship of your body and the gym, what you eat, your nutrition, and what muscle groups are you working on. And I think it's the same thing with ayahuasca. There's different energetic knots and different traumas that we have. And so when we go back, for those of us that choose to go back, we're working different things. And some ceremonies can take care of one big knot. For me, it was the depression and the anxiety that one weekend did it. But then there's, the forgiveness and the self-love and all these other things that take a little bit more time. So I just want to say that if anybody wonders why we go back or why we do more than one ceremony, I at least that's the analogy that I like to share.
After having a challenging first night, did you hesitate on going again?
I didn't doubt that I was going to do it like a second session, like a second retreat. Once I got through the second night, I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming back. But I did doubt doing it the second night because the first night was just brutal. Um, but after I did the second night, I did have to push myself through it. And I did talk to people. I did talk to, the shaman and to try to help me understand a little bit, just so that I had a little bit more substance going into night two, and not as much fear, although that was still there. But after I got through the second night, I didn't go back to the medicine until 6 months later. So I took that time to integrate what happened. Um, how do I integrate this into my day-to-day life? Because so much happened. And now that I, do integration for people after coming off to ceremony, there's some people that come back with a lot. And there's some people that they don't really have a lot happening in that weekend. So there's not a lot to integrate. Um, but it just depends. Everybody's ceremony is different. But I do find that most people that come to the medicine always come back at least a second time. But for the most part, they always come back.
What would you say to someone who had a challenging experience and is hesitating and thinking whether they want to participate in another ceremony?
There's two different types of challenging experiences, and I think it's so important to talk about that. So I want to thank you for asking that question. There's a challenging experience that you can have if you go to the wrong place or to the wrong shamans or guides or facilitators. You could have a very challenging experience, very traumatic experience that might leave you worse than what you came in with. And so then I for sure understand why you wouldn't want to go back. So I would, for somebody that is going for their first time, is absolutely do your research on the retreat space, wherever that is, whether it's in the US or outside of the country. making sure that the space is held with respect and with reverence with the medicine, that they're trained in the medicine and knowing what they're doing. If that is in place, and then you have a challenging experience, um, then I would say that experience is building a bridge for you to understand the world of the shadow, or the world of survival that most of us lived in before the medicine, to building a bridge to your higher sacred self, right, which is ultimately what the medicine shows us. So that challenging experience is just another lesson, another experience for you to begin building that bridge. And almost all ceremonies are going to be challenging, but it is the challenging ceremonies where I have found that I have grown the most and that I have learned the most. So my beautiful ceremonies where I have beautiful visions and like just connected to the celestial realms and being with God and being one with the creator, those are beautiful. And it's almost like, oh, that's like my resting place, you know? But it is the challenging ceremonies that actually are making me who I am. So I would see the challenging experiences like, all right, I got some really good work done. It's like going to the gym again, that same analogy, like really good workout, or did you just go to the sauna and relax? Because the sauna feels equally nice and you're relaxing and you're also, burning away toxins, but you're not doing as much work, right? But when you're doing a really good workout and you come out feeling like, okay, I accomplished, or I kicked that workout's ass, it's the same thing with, I think, ayahuasca. You're going to have challenging ceremonies, absolutely, but those are going to be what make you. And the beautiful, easy journeys are, I think, ayahuasca's way of reminding you that you also are entitled to feeling both love and peace and joy, because we need that too. They coexist together.
With so many retreat centers out there, how does someone know that a place is safe before they sit with ayahuasca?
Being able to talk to the shamans, the guides, asking them about their training, asking them how they run their ceremonies. A really good shaman or facilitator should be able to answer those questions without hesitation. They should be able to tell you their training, um, how they run their ceremonies, explain to you like, hey, this is what happens on the first night. This is how we give the medicine. This is how we control the space. Another good question to ask is, can they bring down the force of the medicine? Not a lot of people know this, but sometimes the medicine can be very strong for some people. And so if you are sitting with somebody that's very skilled in the medicine, they're able to bring the force down. They can't take you out of the medicine, but they can bring it down to where you are actually able to work within the medicine space. Sometimes if the medicine becomes too strong, then you're kind of lost and you're not able to really have a journey and heal and learn from the medicine, because it can become very overwhelming. So being able to bring down the force of the medicine is a question that would be really good to ask. Um, do they have people that either hold space? And if they don't, how many people do they have in their ceremony? Sometimes with larger groups, like there's places that have very large groups, like 40, 50 people. As long as the space is contained, I think it's okay. But if it's just one person that's serving the medicine, then it's very hard to control all those energies. So making sure that they have safe space holders, being able to know like, okay, what happens if I start freaking out? How would they handle that? Um, Also for Shipibo traditions, which is the lineage and tradition I'm studying under, because there's different ones. There's Yawanawa, there's Umbandaime, there's Santo Daime. There's different traditions that work with ayahuasca, but for Shipibo, the shamans need to have diets with the healing plants and the spirit. So, asking the shaman, like, what diets do you have? Because the diets and the plant spirits are the ones that are doing the healing and the disconnecting and the cleansing, and the shaman just becomes a vessel for those plants to come through and work through them. Other traditions do other things. So also asking like, okay, what tradition, how do you handle the medicine? Do you do Icaros? Is it just a playlist? In the church that I go to, we always start with Icaros first, and the medicine music is like towards the end, but there's most of the time or most of the ceremony, the journey is just Icaros cleansing, cleansing, disconnecting, disconnecting. And then it's like when all the work is done for all the participants, okay, then once the medicine starts to, kind of level set and we're off, then we're listening to music. But I've also heard of some places where they just play music or it's just silent the whole night. Also asking about that because that can participants can get lost in their journey. It's the Icaros that bring them back and guide them in the journey. So yeah, I would say those are the top questions to ask.
From your perspective, why is integration so important?
Yeah, that's a big one. Because the medicine changes you for sure, but it is the integration after that changes you long term and that builds the foundation of your new you, which is ultimately where we're all heading, right? Where we all want to be. We want to be better people. We want to, heal. We want to be better human beings, be of service, live a good life. But what happens a lot of the time is when people go to the medicine, people forget that the medicine is a tool. The medicine will meet you halfway, but it is our responsibility and our accountability to meet the medicine halfway. So it's teamwork like everything else. It's 50% you, 50% the medicine. The medicine will bring up and show you the things you need to do or the things you need to not do anymore. Um, Patterns that you need to change, mirrors that mirrors you on a deep level, and then it's up to us to actually make those changes happen in the 3D. There's something that I share that's called the bridge of integration, and it's not just for people who do medicine. This can help anybody, but especially for those people who do medicine. There's the shadow self or the survival self that I was talking about, and then the sacred and higher self. And so there's this bridge that we cross over many, many times, especially if we do medicine, where we take the teachings and the knowledge and the wisdom that the medicine gives us about who we are on this side of the bridge, which is we're all coming from a side of shadow and survival, into the sacred higher self, which is ultimately where we're heading, which is the healing and the enlightenment. And so she gives us these tools and this knowledge for us to bring back and forth. And that's how we begin to like weave together these two separate levels of consciousness into one, which makes us whole. A lot of people think that integration is just something we do a couple weeks after ceremony and then that's it, but integration is who we become. It's an embodiment of the medicine speaking through you, who you become as a person, um, who you change to be a better person. It's a lifelong thing, and I think that a lot of people miss that. They think, okay, I'm gonna just integrate because I just had ceremony, and then I'm only gonna prep 2 weeks before, but it all works in tandem. It's all connected. There's three pillars that I always share, which is the preparation, the intention, why you're coming into the medicine or to ceremony, and then integration. And those three things is what actually creates the wholeness or the new you, that's coming back from medicine. A lot of people get stuck here, and then they start to use the medicine as a crutch, which she can become that if that's how you use it. Again, she's a tool, just like any other tool. It's going to work the way that you use it. Um, and That's why I think integration is what creates the new you and the healing. The medicine just gives you the tools to be able to create that.
Mm. How did you integrate some of your personal experiences?
Referring back to the one that I shared about my childhood, it took me a while to integrate that. And at that time, it was a little bit harder just because I didn't know the medicine very well and I didn't understand what integration was. I kind of learned integration on my own through just, trial and error. Now I have a better understanding of how that works. But I think I'll share two examples, maybe how I handled it then and maybe how I would handle it now, or how I handle my integration now and versus then. Then, with what came up, I sat with it. I kind of replayed what happened. And especially the part where she talked about what does anger do for me? Because I also had anger for my son's dad. I had anger for myself. I had anger for my parents. Like there's just this, I didn't realize that there was just anger living in me. And that's why I was so reactive all the time. But it was really sadness that was being covered up with anger. So I kind of sat with like, where is this anger coming from? What can I do about this? And I didn't poke too much at it in the beginning. I mainly just sat with it and I tried to understand more about how I lived in anger like my whole life. Because it's like this big knot, I think anger was the root of that, and then it just has like different branches and it stems into different areas of your life. And so I started to evaluate, well, I'm angry here, I'm angry here, I'm angry when this happens, I'm angry when this happens. And then it all kind of comes back to the same thing. And so then when you start working on one thing, I have found that it kind of trickles into everything else. Um, so at that time, with what came up with my childhood, I was just mainly just sitting with it, I think, and understanding anger in its totality versus just that one isolated incident. And then that also went hand in hand with forgiveness, which I learned, through different ceremonies. Um, Now, how I handle integration now is, understanding the medicine in a different way. There's sometimes when you're in the journey, you want to work out every possible scenario while you're in the medicine. I don't know if this has happened to you. Like she shows you something, you're sitting, you're trying to like work out all the like angles and nooks and crannies of it. And you're like, but how am I gonna, how am I gonna do this? And the medicine's like, just shut up, like you'll figure this out later. So it's breaking down the ceremony, like what did she show you? Did she give you did she just show it to you like one big picture for you to just see? Or does she break down like a whole plan? Because that's when she gives me things, sometimes she'll show me a big picture and then I know that, okay, I'm just supposed to watch this. And later on, things will start to unfold as the days come along, as the weeks come along. Like I'll start to receive insight. So now I know that. And then there's other times where she just breaks down like it's like a whole plan. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to do anything. I'm just watching this whole plan get built out. And then how you integrate that when you come back is she gave you the whole plan. So you just take action and you just start doing it. There's other times where you have to just trust that things will begin to unfold slowly. um, Even when the medicine speaks in silence, when people don't get visions or huge insights or profound experiences, that still requires integration, because like how can you integrate when there's nothing that really happened? Like the medicine's still working in you because she touches your DNA and she's still working, even if you don't see or don't have these profound like visions. But like, how do you integrate a silent ceremony? It's also testing like our patience and our trust um, in the medicine. So integrating that as well. I've gone through that also, like I didn't see anything and this is the intention that I came in with, how do you integrate that? So I think every ceremony is different. Now, I understand the medicine in a different way. So when people usually bring an example, I'm like, oh, okay, how did this happen? Okay, this is something that she may be asking you to do this or to, sit with it. Like there's different approaches to it, but also even within that, letting somebody have their own journey with it and not um, intervene in their integration process because that's their journey to do as
Mm.
well.
After all your experiences with ayahuasca, how do you feel like your life changed?
I think majority of my changes have been internally and in my psyche. Thing like life exteriorly is pretty much the same, but I don't view it the same. Like I still live in the same house and, I still live in the same area and stuff like that. But all of the changes have been internally and mentally. And so my life has changed because of those things. Like I have a lot more compassion, a lot more love. Um, life still happens, but I handled it differently. I think a lot of the times people have this misconception of like, oh, you've done these many ceremonies, you must be so enlightened. And it's never that, I just, we're still human beings. We just learn to handle them differently. And we're still human, we may mess up, but medicine's right there, right next to you, helping you to correct certain things. Um, I have, I don't have anxiety. I don't have depression. I have worries like any human being? Yeah, but then, I have these tools that she's given me to kind of work themselves out. Or even when I get caught in a moment of worry, I go and do, my rituals of what I need to do, which I never had before. Um, the way I approach situations in life, people, experiences, more with a more opened mind and open heart.
What are some things that you had to let go of?
Letting go of that anger that I was talking about because it used to run my life. I mean, I would see red all the time. You wouldn't think that now, but I have a past. um, letting go of anger, letting go of expectations and trying to change them more into intentions. I think if we have expectations with anything in life, we can get very easily disappointed. But if we have an intention, we still want that, but we understand that it might not work out that way. It's very hard. I'm still working on that, but I would say letting go of anger is a major one. It's something that my family noticed first. They're like, "Oh, she's not angry anymore, walking around wanting to like beat everybody up." Like that was like that's when my parents knew that whatever she's doing is working. So um yeah, anger and I would say expectations and um even control to a point. There were a few ceremonies where she specifically worked on that and they were very challenging. Um to the point where now I'm like I I I find myself wanting to control certain things. And then quickly I'm like, yeah, you have no control over that. Like it is what it is. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. And then, getting out of that like loop of wanting to control something. Now I can see and pick up when other people are having, very strong expectations of control. And it mirrors me back of like I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, that used to be me. And so then it births this like compassion for them, because I'm like, I know what it's like to live in a prison of control within your own mind. And I think when you were saying that people come back from with so much compassion is really because of that, because you see yourself in other people and you understand what they're going through. And you're like, man, brother or sister, like, I understand, you know, that empathy. Mhm.
How do you work with plant medicine now?
I mainly work with ayahuasca. Um, Out of all the other plant medicines, I have tried a couple of them. I do work with psilocybin from time to time. But I mainly work with ayahuasca in that I continue to do my work, my healing work, always. That's always going to be a priority of mine is to work on myself. But I study and I apprentice under my teacher at I Awaken Church. in Crum, Texas, here in the DFW area. And, I'm learning the medicine, one ceremony at a time, and doing diets, going to Peru, learning from her, and mainly continuing to work on myself. I think that that's a long term commitment to have, and walking that narrow path for sure. Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's considering plant medicine for the first time?
Your life's not going to be the same, for sure. Even if you try to go back or suppress certain things, you will always get pulled to understanding that there's more to life. So understanding, like, once the blindfolds are off, they're off. Then you're choosing not to see, but like what you see is you can't unsee. So being aware of that, understanding that plant medicine, any kind, any sacred plant that you decide to meet or sit with is a sacred plant, and it should be respected and cared for. And it's a tool that will help expand your consciousness. It will help to give you tools to be able to handle life. There's this thought that I always think about, whereas life is hard, but what plant medicine has gifted to me is tools, understanding, knowledge, wisdom, intelligence to be able to handle life. Whereas people who have never met plant medicine don't have that. Like, they're still having life happen to them in tests just as much as we are that have, been to the medicine. But we actually have things that we can go back to be able to handle life, whereas people are just handling life without anything, or worse, with addictions or drugs, or you know so plant medicine is a miracle. And this is coming from, a nurse who all she knew was Western medicine, and now I understand both aspects of that. But I would say that, mainly it's a tool to be able to heal, to connect with God, with the divine, and to be able to handle life with a lot more peace, and just opening your life to that there's a whole other life you could be living versus maybe the one that you find in now. I always say, wherever you're going is far better than where you are at. And I think that plant medicine gives us that gift.